Marcus Johnson stood over the fallen officer, his knuckles bloody, the echo of the punch still reverberating through the crowded street. His wife, Tasha, lay handcuffed on the sidewalk, tears streaming down her face. Behind him, dozens of phones recorded everything. Before we dive into this powerful story of justice and courage, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe if you want to see how one man's split-second decision to protect his wife exposed a system of racial injustice that had been hiding in plain sight for years. Marcus Washington had spent 15 years serving his country as a Marine sergeant, earning decorations for valor that filled a shadow box in his study. At 38, he had completed his final tour in Afghanistan just 6 months ago, ready to build a civilian life in Philadelphia with his wife Tasha. They had met during one of his leaves when she was working at the VA hospital as a nurse. Her compassion for injured veterans had captured his heart immediately, and after a whirlwind romance, they married 3 years ago. Together, they had built what looked like a perfect life from the outside. Their home in the predominantly white Chestnut Hill neighborhood stood as a testament to their hard work and determination. Marcus had leveraged his military experience into a lucrative position as a security consultant for a private firm, while Tasha worked as a pediatric nurse at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. Their careers afforded them comfort, but not without cost. Despite their achievements, education, and professional success, the Washingtons regularly experienced subtle and not-so-subtle reminders that some neighbors viewed them as outsiders. Anonymous complaints to the Homeowners Association about minor issues with their property. The way certain neighbors crossed the street rather than walk past their house. The suspicious glances at Tasha when she shopped in the upscale stores nearby. The police cruisers that seemed to drive by their home with unusual frequency. But they persevered, believing that excellence was the best response to prejudice. On this particular Saturday morning in May, the air was warm with the promise of summer. Tasha had been planning for weeks to throw Marcus a surprise party for his 39th birthday. She had invited his Marine buddies, family members from Chicago, and the few genuine friends they had made in Philadelphia. Everything needed to be perfect. Marcus had left early that morning for his weekly workout with some former military colleagues, giving Tasha the opportunity to shop for party supplies. The plan was to meet for lunch afterward in Center City. Dressed in a yellow sundress that complemented her deep brown skin, Tasha visited several stores in the upscale shopping district, gathering decorations, ingredients for Marcus's favorite dishes, and a custom cake from a renowned bakery. Her final stop was Hendrickson's, an exclusive department store, where she intended to buy a new shirt for Marcus to wear at his party. After selecting a dark blue button-down that would complement his athletic frame, she paid and exited the store, multiple shopping bags in hand, receipt tucked into her purse. She had walked barely 20 feet when a voice called sharply from behind, "Excuse me, miss?" A white man in an expensive suit approached rapidly, his face flushed with what appeared to be indignation. "I need you to come back inside the store." Confused, Tasha asked what the problem was. "Security has reason to believe you may have merchandise that wasn't paid for," he said loudly enough for passers-by to hear. "I paid for everything," Tasha replied calmly, reaching for her purse. "I have the receipt right here." But the man who identified himself as the store manager was already gesturing to a security guard. "We've had a series of thefts lately. Standard procedure is to verify in the security office." Tasha felt her heart racing but maintained her composure. "I understand, but I can show you the receipt right here." She retrieved the paper from her purse, but the manager barely glanced at it. "We need to check the merchandise against the receipt properly. Inside." As a small crowd began to gather, Tasha noticed 2 police officers approaching. Officer Brennan and Officer Wallace had been patrolling the shopping district when they received the call about a disruptive shoplifter at Hendrickson's. Both were white men in their 40s with over 15 years on the force. Both had reputations in certain communities that never made it to their official records. The officers immediately took aggressive stances, hands resting near their weapons. "What seems to be the problem here?" Officer Brennan asked, addressing only the store manager. "We believe she may have stolen merchandise." The manager replied, She's refusing to come back inside for verification." "I'm not refusing anything," Tasha interjected. "I just wanted to show him the receipt first, which he won't look at." Officer Brennan turned to her with cold eyes. "Ma'am, you need to lower your voice and comply with store personnel." "My voice isn't raised," Tasha replied evenly, "and I am complying. I just want to show my receipt first." Officer Wallace stepped closer. "Turn around and put your hands behind your back." Shocked, Tasha took a step backward. "What? I haven't done anything wrong." "That's for us to determine," Brennan said, grabbing her arm roughly. "You're being detained for questioning." Without further warning, the officers seized Tasha's arms, causing her to drop her shopping bags. They spun her around and slammed her against the storefront window, the impact knocking the breath from her lungs. As they roughly handcuffed her, her sundress rode up, exposing her thighs to the growing crowd of onlookers. "Please," she gasped, struggling to maintain her dignity. "This is a mistake. Just look at my receipt." Neither officer responded as they began searching through her purse without permission. Across the street, Marcus was just arriving for their lunch date. Dressed in jeans and a fitted T-shirt that revealed his muscular build, he froze at the sight of his wife handcuffed and pressed against a building. For a moment, he couldn't process what he was seeing. Then training kicked in. He crossed the street with measured steps, hands visible, voice controlled, despite the rage building inside him. "Excuse me, officers. That's my wife. What's happening here?" Officer Brennan glanced at him dismissively. "Step back, sir. This doesn't concern you. With all due respect, that's my wife, so it absolutely concerns me." Marcus kept his distance but stood his ground. "She's being detained on suspicion of shoplifting," Wallace explained curtly. "The store will press charges if the merchandise is stolen." "She doesn't steal," Marcus said firmly. "This is a misunderstanding. If you just check her receipt—" "Back up now." Brennan barked, moving toward Marcus with his hand on his taser. "I'm not interfering with your work, officer," Marcus said, raising his hand slightly. "I'm just asking you to verify her receipt before this escalates unnecessarily." "You want to see escalation," Brennan snarled, shoving Marcus backward with both hands. "How about I arrest you for interfering with police business, boy?" The racial slur hit Marcus like a physical blow. In that moment, he saw Tasha's tear-streaked face, the indignity of her position, the shopping bags scattered on the sidewalk containing items for his birthday celebration. He saw the smirk on Brennan's face that said this officer expected, perhaps even wanted him to react badly. Marcus had faced Taliban fighters with less fear than he felt, now knowing what could happen to a black man who challenged police authority. In that split second, as Brennan reached to grab him, training from 15 years as a Marine took over. Marcus delivered a single precise strike to Brennan's jaw, a textbook punch thrown with the perfect combination of technique, timing, and power. Officer Brennan dropped like a stone unconscious before he hit the ground. The crowd's reaction was immediate and chaotic. Some people gasped, others pulled out phones to record, a few backed away anticipating violence. Officer Wallace drew his weapon, pointing it at Marcus. "On the ground now!" he screamed, his face contorted with shock and rage. Marcus slowly raised his hands, knowing the next few seconds would determine whether he lived or died. Marcus had barely begun to kneel when Officer Wallace and two responding officers tackled him to the concrete. His face slammed against the sidewalk, splitting his lip and bloodying his nose. One officer drove a knee into his back, while another wrenched his arms behind him, applying the handcuffs so tightly that his fingers immediately began to tingle from restricted blood flow. "You're dead, you know that," one officer whispered in his ear, pressing his face harder into the rough surface. "Nobody touches a cop and walks away." Through the chaos, Marcus caught glimpses of Tasha screaming his name as they pulled her toward a separate police car. Blood ran into his eyes from a cut on his forehead, turning the scene red and surreal. The crowd had grown larger, with dozens of onlookers recording the incident on their phones. Some shouted accusations of police brutality, while others called Marcus a criminal who deserved whatever happened to him. The officers lifted Marcus roughly and half-dragged him to a patrol car, his feet barely touching the ground. They made no effort to protect his head as they shoved him into the back seat, causing him to hit his temple on the doorframe. As the car pulled away, Marcus saw Officer Brennan being attended to by paramedics still unconscious on the sidewalk. At the police station, Marcus was processed like a dangerous criminal. Officers made jokes about angry monkeys within his earshot. Despite his visible injuries, requests for medical attention were ignored. His rights were read perfunctorily, and when he asked for a phone call, the desk sergeant told him he'd get one when we're good and ready. In the holding cell, Marcus sat alone on a metal bench using his shirt to stem the blood from his forehead. His military training helped him maintain outward calm, but inside fear churned like acid. Not fear for himself, but for Tasha. What were they doing to her? Was she safe? Was she terrified? Meanwhile, videos of the incident had already begun circulating online. Some clips showed only the moment Marcus punched Officer Brennan, while others captured the events leading up to it, including the rough treatment of Tasha. Hashtags like #PhillyMarinePunch and #JusticeForTasha began trending locally then nationally. Within hours, the Philadelphia Police Department released a statement. Today, Officer Robert Brennan was violently assaulted while performing his duties in Center City. The suspect, identified as Marcus Washington, struck Officer Brennan without provocation during a routine shoplifting investigation. Officer Brennan remains hospitalized with serious injuries. Washington faces multiple felony charges, including aggravated assault on a police officer resisting arrest and interfering with police duties. The department stands firmly behind our officers who risk their lives daily to protect our communities. The statement made no mention of Tasha or the circumstances preceding the punch. However, eyewitness accounts and videos told a different story, creating immediate division in how the incident was perceived. As darkness fell over Philadelphia, community organizers began mobilizing. Pastor James Wilson of First Baptist Church in North Philadelphia called an emergency meeting of local black leaders. Veterans groups, hearing that Marcus was a decorated Marine, reached out to their networks for information. The local chapter of the NAACP issued a demand for a full investigation. 6 hours after her arrest, Tasha was finally released without charges. The store had verified her receipt, confirming she had paid for everything in her possession. No apology was offered. A female officer returned her belongings in a plastic bag, minus her cell phone, which was being held as evidence. Exhausted and traumatized, Tasha found herself standing outside the police station at 11 at night with no phone and no way home. A young black officer who introduced himself only as Williams discreetly slipped her $20 for a cab and whispered, "Your husband's still inside. They're not processing him out tonight. You should get a lawyer immediately." The cab dropped Tasha at their Chestnut Hill home, where she was shocked to find red spray paint across their garage door. "Cop beaters, get out!" With trembling hands, she used her key to enter, half expecting to find intruders inside. The house was empty, but felt suddenly alien and threatening. She double-checked every lock, then sat in the dark kitchen and finally allowed herself to break down completely. When the tears subsided, she began making calls. Her first was to Marcus's former commanding officer, Colonel Davis. The second was to James Carter, a civil rights attorney who had successfully represented several victims of police misconduct. Carter agreed to meet her at the police station first thing in the morning. Throughout the night, the story continued spreading online. Cable news picked it up, with coverage splitting predictably along political lines. Conservative outlets described Marcus as a violent ex-military man who attacked a police officer unprovoked, while liberal networks questioned the officer's conduct and highlighted Marcus's distinguished service record. By morning, crowds had gathered outside the police station, holding signs with slogans like "Free Marcus Washington" and "Black Lives Matter." Counter-protesters arrived too, waving thin blue line flags and chanting support for the police. Inside, Marcus faced his preliminary hearing. Still wearing his blood-stained clothes from the day before, with untreated cuts on his face, he stood before Judge Michael Reynolds, known for his tough stance on crimes against police officers. The prosecutor painted Marcus as a dangerous individual who had used his military combat training to seriously injure Officer Brennan, who was reportedly suffering from a concussion and possible permanent damage. Despite Attorney Carter's arguments about excessive force and racial profiling, Judge Reynolds set bail at $500,000, an amount far beyond what the Washingtons could afford. As Marcus was led back to his cell, Carter promised to fight for a bail reduction and begin working on his defense immediately. "They want to make an example of you," the attorney said grimly, "but we're going to fight this every step of the way." Back at home, Tasha received an ominous call from their mortgage company. Someone had contacted them claiming the Washingtons were abandoning the property, attempting to trigger foreclosure proceedings. Her supervisor at the hospital called next, explaining awkwardly that she was being placed on administrative leave due to the unfortunate publicity surrounding her family. By noon, it was clear that powerful forces were aligning against them, attempting to destroy not just Marcus's freedom, but everything they had worked for. Tasha sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by the party supplies she had purchased the day before, wondering how their perfect life had shattered so completely in less than 24 hours. But as reporters gathered on her lawn and her phone filled with messages of support from friends, colleagues, and strangers, something hardened within her. They had chosen the wrong family to target. Marcus had fought for his country. Now she would fight for him. With newfound resolve, she stepped outside to face the cameras. As Marcus sat in his jail cell that night, memories from his childhood in South Chicago flooded back with painful clarity. How many times had he watched police harass people in his neighborhood for simply existing while black? He remembered being 12 years old when officers threw his uncle against a wall for matching a description. He was 16 when his basketball coach was pulled over with the team in the van, made to lie face down on the pavement because his taillight was out. He joined the Marines at 18 partly to escape that environment, seeking a system where merit might matter more than skin color. Had it been perfect? No. He'd faced racism in the military too, but it had been different. When bullets were flying in Fallujah, nobody cared about the color of the Marine next to them. When he saved his unit by spotting an IED on a dusty Afghan road, his commendation didn't mention race. He'd risen through ranks on ability, earning respect from men who might never have spoken to him in civilian life. The irony wasn't lost on him that he had survived multiple combat tours only to face his greatest danger on an American street wearing civilian clothes in broad daylight. Do you believe the system is designed to protect everyone equally? Comment number 1. If you think justice should be colorblind, or number 2, if you think we need to acknowledge systemic problems before we can fix them. Like and subscribe to join this important conversation about justice in America. What experiences shaped Marcus into the man who would risk everything to protect his wife's dignity? A few cells down, another inmate was shouting for medical attention and being ignored just as Marcus had been. His own injuries had finally stopped bleeding, but the pain throbbed with his heartbeat. He wondered if Tasha was safe, if she had made it home, if anyone was helping her. He pictured her face as they'd handcuffed her, the humiliation and fear in her eyes. It was that image more than any physical discomfort that tortured him now. While Marcus reflected in his cell, journalist Ayanna Lewis was working late at the Philadelphia Tribune, the city's historic black newspaper. The viral videos had caught her attention immediately, but something about the official police statement didn't add up. She began digging into the backgrounds of the officers involved. What she discovered was disturbing but not surprising. Officer Robert Brennan had 8 excessive force complaints in his file, all filed by black or Latino citizens, all dismissed without disciplinary action. His partner, Officer Michael Wallace, had 6 similar complaints. Both officers had been named in 2 civil lawsuits that the city had settled quietly with sealed records. Even more troubling, both officers had consistently patrolled in areas where affluent black families lived or shopped, despite neither living in those districts. Lewis started making calls to her sources within the department, Meanwhile, at Philadelphia, General Hospital Officer Brennan was giving his official statement from his hospital bed, claiming Marcus had attacked him without warning or provocation. "I was just doing my job protecting the community from a shoplifter when this guy blindsided me," he told the Internal Affairs investigator. "I never said anything racial. That's a complete fabrication to distract from his crime." What Brennan didn't know was that the department was already dealing with a major problem. Both officers' body cameras had supposedly malfunctioned during the incident. Given the multiple civilian videos circulating online, the lack of body camera footage looked suspiciously convenient. At the Washington home, Tasha received an unexpected visitor. Marcus's commanding officer, Colonel Richard Davis, had flown in from Virginia after her call. A tall, imposing white man with a military bearing, he stood on her vandalized porch in civilian clothes, offering support that went beyond professional courtesy. "Sergeant Washington is one of the finest Marines I've ever commanded," he told her in the living room. "I've seen him maintain perfect control in situations that would break most men. If he threw that punch, he had damn good reason." He revealed that the military was monitoring the case closely. "The Corps protects its own, Mrs. Washington. Marcus saved American lives in combat. We won't forget that." As he was leaving, he added something that gave Tasha her first real hope. "The Military Legal Office has reached out to your attorney. We have resources that might help." That night, during her brief phone call with Marcus, they spoke in the cautious code of those who know they're being monitored. "I love you," she said, fighting tears. "Stay strong." "Always have, always will," he replied, their standard exchange that meant so much more now. "Don't worry about me, just take care of yourself." "I'm not alone in this fight," she assured him. "People are standing with us." After the call, Marcus returned to his cell to find a new inmate in the bunk across from him. The man studied Marcus with curious eyes before saying quietly, "You don't remember me, do you, Sergeant?" Marcus looked more carefully at the bearded face. "Should I?" The man rolled up his sleeve to reveal a jagged scar. "Kandahar Province, 2018. Your unit came through our outpost on the way to a remote village. On the return trip you spotted the ambush before anyone else. Saved about 20 of us, including me." Recognition dawned on Marcus's face. "Miller, Army Specialist." "That's right, Justin Miller." He extended his hand. "Guess it's my turn to have your back now." The unexpected alliance would prove valuable in the days ahead. While Marcus was finding an ally in jail, Ayanna Lewis was meeting with a confidential source in the parking garage of the Tribune building. The source, a clerk in the police department's records division, passed her a thumb drive. "The GPS data from the patrol cars assigned to Brennan and Wallace for the past 6 months, the source whispered. "They've been systematically targeting areas where successful black professionals live or shop. And there's more. There's an unofficial quota system. Certain officers are rewarded for making arrests in those areas." Lewis asked the obvious question, rewarded by whom? The answer would shake Philadelphia's power structure to its core. As dawn broke over the city, Attorney James Carter was reviewing the evidence Tasha had provided, including the original store receipt that proved no theft had occurred. He was particularly interested in the store security footage, which should have captured the initial accusation. But when he contacted Hendrickson's to request the video, he was told it had been accidentally erased during routine system maintenance. Too convenient to be coincidence. Carter began preparing subpoenas. He also started investigating why Tasha had been targeted in the first place. A conversation with a sympathetic employee at Hendrickson's revealed that she had matched a vague description of a black woman who had allegedly stolen items weeks earlier. Female African-American, 5'6" to 5'8", between 25 and 40. A description so general it could have fit thousands of women in Philadelphia. The targeting hadn't been random, it had been racial profiling in its most basic form. The web of connections and corruptions was beginning to reveal itself, but the question remained, how high did it go, and would exposing it be enough to save Marcus from a system determined to make him pay for daring to strike back? Attorney James Carter sat across from Tasha in his downtown office, the morning sun casting long shadows across the conference table covered with documents, video stills, and legal pads filled with notes. "We're building a strong case," Carter explained, his voice conveying both determination and caution. "The videos from bystanders clearly show the officers escalated the situation unnecessarily. We have proof you paid for everything. The racial slur Officer Brennan used is audible in at least 2 of the recordings." He tapped a file folder containing statements from 3 witnesses who had come forward. These people all confirmed that Marcus identified himself calmly and was attempting to de-escalate when Brennan shoved him and used a racial epithet. Tasha nodded, dark circles under her eyes betraying her exhaustion. "So what's our strategy?" "Two-pronged approach," Carter replied. "For Marcus's criminal case, we're focusing on self-defense and defense of others. He reasonably believed you were in danger from excessive force. The punch, while unfortunate, was a proportional response to an immediate threat." He paused. "Simultaneously, we'll be filing a civil rights lawsuit against the officers, the department, and the city for racial profiling, excessive force, and violation of constitutional rights." What Carter didn't say aloud was that this case was already becoming much bigger than one incident. His office had received dozens of calls from other black residents with similar stories about these same officers. A pattern was emerging that suggested institutional racism far beyond a few bad apples. Outside the legal offices, the public response was growing exponentially. The hashtag #JusticeForMarcus had gone viral nationally, with celebrities and athletes sharing the videos and demanding accountability. Veterans groups released statements supporting Marcus, highlighting his decorated service record and questioning why a man who had served his country honorably was being treated like a dangerous criminal. Black community organizations in Philadelphia organized daily protests outside the police headquarters and courthouse. What surprised many was Tasha's emergence as a powerful voice in this growing movement. Initially shy of cameras and crowds, necessity had transformed her. At a rally organized by local churches, she stepped to the microphone with quiet dignity that commanded attention. "My husband and I did everything this country told us would lead to the American dream," she began, her voice gathering strength with each word. "We got educated. We served our nation. We worked hard. We bought a home in a good neighborhood. We followed every rule, and none of that mattered the moment those officers saw the color of our skin." Her testimony about the humiliation of being handcuffed in public, having her purse searched without consent, being separated from her husband, and the fear she felt watching him bleed on the sidewalk resonated deeply with the crowd. "This isn't just about Marcus and me," she concluded. "It's about every black person who lives with the knowledge that at any moment their dignity, their safety, their very life can be taken away because someone with power decided they don't belong." The speech was shared millions of times online, turning Tasha into a reluctant symbol of the movement. But not everyone supported the Washingtons. The police union quickly mobilized its considerable resources, launching a public relations campaign portraying Officer Brennan as a victim of an unprovoked violent assault by a trained military combatant. Brennan gave tearful interviews from his hospital bed, claiming ongoing headaches, vision problems, and possible career-ending injuries. His wife appeared on conservative talk shows, describing their 3 children's fear that Daddy might not be the same again. Union representatives demanded the maximum possible charges and sentencing. Conservative media emphasized Marcus's military combat training, depicting him as a ticking time bomb rather than a decorated veteran. "This man was trained to kill by our government," one pundit declared. "He brought those violent tactics to our streets and used them against a peace officer." Meanwhile, the tide of public opinion began shifting as more information came to light. Someone leaked Marcus's military service record to the press, including his Bronze Star with Combat V for valor awarded after he risked his life to save fellow Marines during an ambush. Photos emerged of Marcus volunteering with veteran support groups and mentoring at-risk youth. Former colleagues from both military and civilian life came forward with stories of his professionalism, calm demeanor, and integrity. The contrasting narratives created a national conversation about race policing, military service, and justice that played out across dinner tables, social media platforms, and news programs. Inside Hendrickson's department store, change was happening on a smaller but significant scale. After facing protests and a consumer boycott, the store manager who had called the police on Tasha agreed to meet with community leaders. During that difficult conversation, he was forced to confront his own implicit biases when asked a simple question. Would you have suspected a well-dressed white woman of shoplifting in the same circumstances? His uncomfortable silence spoke volumes. The store subsequently announced mandatory anti-bias training for all employees and a review of security practices. At Children's Hospital, Tasha's colleagues were outraged by her administrative leave. They organized a petition demanding her reinstatement and held a fundraiser that collected over $50,000 toward legal expenses. Parents of patients she had cared for wrote letters of support describing her compassion and professionalism. The hospital administration, facing mounting pressure, issued a statement that they were reviewing the situation. The Marine Corps, walking a careful political line, released an official statement. While the Corps does not comment on ongoing legal proceedings involving veterans, we affirm that Sergeant Marcus Washington served with distinction during multiple combat deployments, earning numerous commendations for his courage, leadership, and sound judgment under pressure. The Marine Corps believes in due process and the presumption of innocence for all Americans. Behind the scenes, however, military legal advisors were providing Carter with assistance, and several high-ranking officers had made private calls to Philadelphia officials expressing concern about the case. In jail, Marcus was adapting as Marines are trained to do. He kept to himself but remained observant, quickly learning the unwritten rules and power dynamics of incarceration. When a young black man was brought in, clearly terrified and facing his first arrest for a minor drug offense, Marcus quietly advised him on his rights and how to navigate the system. Word spread that the Marine who decked a cop was using his knowledge to help others. While some inmates avoided him, fearing association with someone targeted by police, others sought his advice. He began holding informal sessions in the common area, explaining basic legal concepts and encouraging inmates to participate in their own defense rather than accepting plea deals out of fear or ignorance. Even some correctional officers treated him with a grudging respect, particularly those with military backgrounds. The movement supporting Marcus and Tasha continued growing, but powerful forces were preparing to fight back, determined to make an example of the man who had dared to strike a police officer and the woman who refused to be silenced. District Attorney William Preston called a press conference on the courthouse steps, his expression grave as he faced a forest of microphones and cameras. Behind him stood a phalanx of police officers in dress uniforms, creating a visual backdrop of law enforcement solidarity. Today, I am announcing that my office will pursue the maximum charges against Marcus Washington for his unprovoked and violent assault on Officer Robert Brennan. Preston declared, his voice stern with practiced indignation. The evidence clearly shows that Washington, using his military combat training, delivered a potentially lethal blow to an officer performing his lawful duty. This office will seek aggravated assault charges carrying a potential 20-year sentence. Preston, who was rumored to have gubernatorial ambitions, continued with rhetoric clearly aimed at his conservative base. In these difficult times, we must send a clear message that attacks on law enforcement will not be tolerated in Philadelphia. Our brave officers deserve our support and respect, not violence from those who refuse to comply with lawful orders. What Preston carefully avoided mentioning was his close personal and financial ties to the police union, which had been his largest campaign contributor, or the fact that Officer Brennan's father-in-law was a major political donor. As the press conference concluded, Ayanna Lewis from the Philadelphia Tribune attempted to ask about the officer's history of excessive force complaints and the missing body camera footage. Preston pointed to another reporter deliberately ignoring her questions. Just hours after the district attorney's announcement, the Philadelphia Police Department released the findings of its internal investigation. Officers Brennan and Wallace had been cleared of any wrongdoing in their detainment of Tasha Washington. The report stated that the officers had followed departmental protocols and used appropriate force for the situation. The investigation had been completed with unusual speed, raising questions about its thoroughness and impartiality. The same afternoon, medical records were leaked showing that Officer Brennan had been released from the hospital the day after the incident with a diagnosis of mild concussion. This contradicted his public claims of serious, potentially permanent injuries. However, this information was quickly overshadowed when Brennan appeared on a nationally televised interview wearing a neck brace that hadn't been present in earlier appearances. "I may never be the same again," he told the sympathetic interviewer, his wife clutching his hand supportively. "The doctors say there could be long-term neurological damage. Some days I can't even remember my kids' names." The interview featured emotional footage of Brennan struggling to play with his children, wincing dramatically when attempting to turn his head. Medical experts who viewed the segment noted inconsistencies in his portrayed symptoms, but their observations received little mainstream attention. Meanwhile, Marcus and Tasha found their past being scrutinized for anything that could discredit them. A photo from Marcus's college days, showing him at a party where alcohol was present, was presented on certain news outlets as evidence of a pattern of reckless behavior. Tasha's social media history was combed for any politically charged statements, with a 5-year-old post supporting Black Lives Matter highlighted as proof of anti-police sentiment. Their financial records were somehow leaked with insinuations about their mortgage and car payments despite their excellent credit history. Even their decision not to have children yet was questioned, with one commentator asking, "What kind of family values do these people really have?" The pressure extended beyond media scrutiny. Tasha received a call from the hospital administration informing her that her administrative leave was being extended indefinitely, with strong hints that her position might be eliminated entirely due to budget restructuring. Their mortgage company sent formal notice that they were investigating irregularities in the Washington's loan application from 3 years earlier, threatening possible foreclosure. Their homeowners insurance notified them of a premium increase due to enhanced risk factors in the property. These coordinated financial pressures were clearly designed to break their resolve and resources simultaneously. In jail, Marcus faced new challenges. Without explanation, he was transferred to solitary confinement, ostensibly for his own protection, following an unspecified threat. The real purpose became clear when he was denied access to the law library, and his meetings with Attorney Carter were repeatedly delayed due to scheduling issues. His mail was accidentally delivered to other inmates or disappeared entirely. The phone he was permitted to use for legal calls mysteriously malfunctioned whenever he attempted to reach his attorney. During a rare meeting with Carter conducted through glass with guards hovering nearby, the attorney shared disturbing news. "They're withholding evidence," Carter said quietly, mindful of potential eavesdropping. The surveillance video from the store shows Tasha clearly displaying her receipt, but they've refused to provide it despite our subpoena. We've filed a motion to compel, but Judge Reynolds is dragging his feet on the ruling. Carter had more concerning information. Several witnesses who had initially come forward with statements supporting Marcus's version of events had reported being visited by police officers who questioned them about unrelated matters like parking tickets, business licenses, or their immigration status. "They're being intimidated," Carter said grimly. 2 have already recanted their statements, claiming they didn't see the incident clearly. The most alarming development came when Officer Wallace requested a private meeting with the district attorney, suggesting he might have information relevant to the case. Rumors circulated that Wallace was considering testifying that his partner had indeed used racial slurs and excessive force. Within days of this meeting, Wallace was reassigned to overnight duty in the city's highest crime district, widely considered a punishment posting. The message to other officers who might consider breaking ranks was unmistakably clear. As public interest in the case continued to grow, a conservative political action committee funded billboard campaigns across Philadelphia showing Officer Brennan in his uniform alongside his family with the caption, "He risks his life for you. Who stands for him?" In smaller communities outside the city, lawn signs appeared reading, "Back the Blue" and "Support Officer Brennan." City officials began applying pressure more directly. The mayor's chief of staff contacted Tasha, suggesting that if Marcus accepted a plea deal for lesser charges, the harassment would stop and Tasha might be able to return to her job. "This has gone beyond one incident," the official said with calculated casualness. "It's becoming a referendum on policing itself. A lot of important people just want this to go away." Tasha's response was succinct. "So do I. Drop the charges and fire those officers." The call ended abruptly. Despite the mounting pressure, the resistance continued building. Marcus's fellow Marines organized a legal fund that quickly raised hundreds of thousands of dollars. Civil rights organizations provided security for Tasha after she received death threats. Alternative media outlets continued investigating the officers' histories and the department's patterns of racial profiling. But as the preliminary hearing approached, the Washington team faced a daunting reality. The system was aligned against them, and the truth alone might not be enough to overcome the combined power of law enforcement politics and media narratives constructed to protect the status quo at all costs. 16-year-old Jaden Robinson had been standing across the street when Marcus punched Officer Brennan. Like dozens of others, he had recorded the incident on his phone, but unlike most witnesses, Jaden had been filming for several minutes before the confrontation escalated. As an aspiring filmmaker from North Philadelphia, he had been documenting urban life for a school project when he noticed the officers approaching Tasha. Something about their body language had triggered his instinct to keep recording. When the videos of the punch went viral, Jaden had watched the online debate with growing frustration. None of the circulating clips showed the full context. His video captured Officer Brennan's racial slur clearly, along with the unnecessary aggression toward both Tasha and Marcus. But when Jaden tried to upload his footage, his phone crashed and the video appeared to be corrupted. For days he tried various recovery methods without success, eventually taking the phone to his cousin Devin, a computer science student at Temple University. Do you believe evidence gets suppressed in cases like these? Comment number 1. If you think the truth often gets buried. Number 2. If you believe the justice system generally works as it should. Like and subscribe to follow this story about how one teenager's technological skills might change the course of justice. Have you ever been in a situation where video evidence made all the difference? Devin worked on the phone for hours, eventually discovering that the video file wasn't actually corrupted but had been fragmented across the phone's storage. Using specialized recovery software, he managed to reconstruct the complete video, revealing much more than any previously seen footage. Not only did it capture Brennan's use of a racial slur, but it also showed Wallace looking directly at his partner with an expression of concern immediately afterward, suggesting he recognized the impropriety. Most crucially, the video included a moment before Marcus arrived, when Brennan was heard saying to Wallace, "Another one trying to shop where they don't belong. Let's teach a lesson." This statement established premeditated intent to intimidate rather than any legitimate law enforcement purpose. Devin immediately recognized the significance of what they'd recovered. "You need to get this to Washington's lawyer right away," he told Jaden. Instead of uploading the video publicly, they contacted Attorney Carter directly. Carter, who had been preparing for the preliminary hearing with diminishing hope, was stunned by what the video revealed. "This changes everything," he told Jaden and Devin. "You may have saved an innocent man from prison." The attorney moved quickly, filing the new evidence with the court and sending copies to the district attorney's office and major news outlets simultaneously to prevent any attempts at suppression. The impact was immediate and seismic. National news networks ran the footage in its entirety, with analysts pointing out the clear evidence of racial profiling and excessive force. Legal experts appeared on panel discussions explaining how the video contradicted official police statements and supported Marcus's self-defense claim. Social media exploded with renewed outrage, the hashtags #HatTheFullVideo and #WhatTheyHid trending nationwide. The police department's spokesperson attempted damage control, claiming the video had been edited or manipulated, but tech experts quickly confirmed its authenticity. Officer Brennan suddenly became unavailable for interviews, and his social media accounts were deleted overnight. His previous claims of severe injury appeared particularly damning when contrasted with the video showing him aggressively shoving Marcus without provocation. The district attorney's office released a terse statement that they were reviewing the new evidence, but sources within the office leaked that Preston was furious, feeling blindsided and concerned about the political fallout. In Washington, D.C., congressional representatives from both parties called for a Justice Department investigation into the Philadelphia Police Department's practices. Veterans across the country organized a massive show of support for Marcus. Thousands of former service members, many in uniform, traveled to Philadelphia to stand outside the courthouse. They formed a solemn line stretching for blocks, standing at parade rest in silent rebuke to a system that had nearly sacrificed one of their own to protect corrupt officers. The powerful visual of decorated veterans from diverse backgrounds united in support of Marcus dominated news coverage and social media feeds. Within the police department, cracks began to appear in the wall of silence. Officer Michael Wallace, perhaps sensing the shifting tide or driven by his own conscience, requested a meeting with Internal Affairs. According to sources close to the investigation, Wallace offered to testify about a departmental culture that encouraged targeting affluent black residents for minor infractions or fabricated violations. He allegedly provided names of supervisors who had established unofficial quotas and rewarded officers who generated high numbers of stops and searches in predominantly black neighborhoods. Wallace's decision to break ranks sent shockwaves through the department. Some officers condemned him as a traitor, while others, particularly younger officers and those of color, privately expressed relief that long-standing issues might finally be addressed. The police union leadership, suddenly on the defensive, issued a statement distancing themselves from any potential misconduct by individual officers, while maintaining their unwavering support for the thousands of officers who serve with integrity. The day after Wallace's meeting with Internal Affairs, the FBI announced a formal investigation into the Philadelphia Police Department for pattern or practice civil rights violations. Agents arrived at police headquarters with subpoenas for personnel records, disciplinary files, and communications related to patrol assignments and performance evaluations. For the first time since his arrest, the possibility of freedom became real for Marcus. Attorney Carter filed an emergency motion for bail reduction based on the new evidence. Judge Reynolds, suddenly conscious of the national spotlight and potential scrutiny of his own record, granted the motion reducing bail to $50,000. Community fundraising had already collected more than enough to cover this amount, and after 23 days in jail, Marcus Washington walked out of the detention center into Tasha's waiting arms. Their reunion, captured by dozens of cameras, became another defining image of the case. Marcus, thinner and bearing visible scars from his arrest, holding Tasha tightly as supporters cheered around them. Neither spoke to the press at that moment, their embrace communicating more than words could express. That night, they returned to their home in Chestnut Hill, where neighbors had cleaned the racist graffiti from their garage door and lined the street with welcome home signs. Inside, they faced the difficult reality of their situation. Despite Marcus's release, he still faced serious charges. Tasha remained unemployed. Their financial pressures had not disappeared, but something fundamental had changed. The isolation they had felt in those first terrible days after the incident had been replaced by a growing movement of support and a renewed faith in the possibility of justice. As they sat in their living room, surrounded by cards and letters from supporters across the country, Marcus and Tasha faced the most difficult decision of their ordeal. The district attorney had quietly offered a deal. Marcus would plead guilty to simple assault, receive a suspended sentence and probation, and in exchange all major charges would be dropped. He would avoid prison, but would carry a criminal record for life. "We could put this behind us," Tasha said softly, holding his hand. "Try to rebuild our lives." Marcus was silent for a long moment, considering all they had endured and all that might still lie ahead if they rejected the offer. "If I take the deal," he finally said, "nothing changes. The next black couple who walks down that street will face the same danger we did." His decision made, he squeezed her hand. "We didn't start this fight, but we might be the ones who can finish it. Not just for us, but for everyone who doesn't have a viral video or national attention to protect them." Tasha nodded, tears in her eyes but resolution in her voice. "Then we keep fighting. Together." The courtroom fell silent as Marcus Washington took the witness stand, his military bearing evident in his straight posture and steady gaze. He wore a charcoal gray suit with a blue tie, his appearance a deliberate contrast to the orange jumpsuit he had worn during earlier hearings. For 5 days, the trial had captured national attention, with every seat in the gallery filled and a crowd of supporters and protesters maintaining vigils outside. Assistant District Attorney Jennifer Michaels approached for cross-examination, her expression suggesting confidence she did not entirely feel. The viral video had forced major adjustments to the prosecution's strategy, but they remained determined to secure a conviction. "Mr. Washington," she began, deliberately avoiding his military rank, "you've described yourself as someone trained to remain calm under pressure, correct?" "Yes, ma'am," Marcus replied evenly. "Marines are trained to assess threats and respond appropriately." "Yet you responded to a verbal confrontation with physical violence," Michaels said, pacing before the jury. "You used your military combat training to strike Officer Brennan with enough force to render him unconscious." Attorney James Carter stood immediately. "Objection. Counsel is testifying and mischaracterizing the evidence." Sustained. Judge Reynolds ruled his approach to the case notably more balanced since the video emerged and federal investigators began examining judicial conduct in police misconduct cases. Michaels adjusted smoothly. "Mr. Washington, is it not true that you could have simply backed away and contacted a supervisor about your concerns?" Marcus met her gaze directly. "Ma'am, Officer Brennan had already physically assaulted me by shoving me backward. He was advancing on me aggressively after using a racial slur. My wife was handcuffed and being held roughly nearby. In that moment, I assessed an immediate threat to both my safety and hers." The prosecution's strategy had become clear during their case presentation. Unable to deny the racial element captured on video, they focused instead on portraying Marcus's response as disproportionate and dangerous. Expert witnesses testified about the potential lethality of a punch delivered by someone with combat training. Police procedural experts insisted that civilians should always comply first and complain later regardless of circumstances. Throughout, they emphasized Marcus's military background not as honorable service, but as evidence of his capacity for violence. The defense had built their case methodically over 3 days. Character witnesses, including Marcus's commanding officer, testified to his exceptional self-control and judgment. Medical experts confirmed that Officer Brennan's injuries were minor and inconsistent with his public claims. Most powerfully, Officer Michael Wallace took the stand as a defense witness, breaking the blue wall of silence at significant personal and professional risk. Wallace's testimony had sent shockwaves through the courtroom. In measured tones, he described a departmental culture that tacitly encouraged targeting affluent black residents for heightened scrutiny and enforcement. There was an understanding, Wallace testified, that certain neighborhoods were to be patrolled more aggressively, particularly where black families had moved into predominantly white areas. He confirmed that he and Brennan had been specifically assigned to the shopping district with instructions to keep an eye on people who didn't look like they belonged there. Wallace acknowledged his own complicity. "I didn't object when I should have. When Officer Brennan used that racial slur, I should have intervened. I failed in my duty that day." His testimony was devastating to the prosecution and potentially career-ending for himself. But Wallace maintained that after 20 years on the force, he could no longer remain silent. Dr. Elaine Mathis, a psychologist specializing in trauma resulting from racial profiling, had testified about the cumulative psychological impact of such encounters. Even seemingly minor incidents of racial profiling create lasting trauma, she explained to the jury. For Black Americans who experience or witness these encounters, each incident connects to a historical and ongoing pattern of dehumanization. The body's stress response doesn't distinguish between a racial slur and a physical threat. Both trigger the same neurological reaction. Tasha's testimony had perhaps been the most affecting for the jury. Dressed simply in a navy blue dress, she described the humiliation of being handcuffed in public, having her purchases treated as stolen goods despite proof of payment, and the terror of watching her husband bloodied and arrested for trying to protect her. "I'm a pediatric nurse," she said, her voice steady despite the emotion visible in her eyes. "I've spent my career caring for children of all backgrounds. That day none of that mattered. All those officers saw was my skin." Now, as Marcus completed his testimony, the case moved to closing arguments. ADA Michaels went first, attempting to refocus the jury on the letter of the law rather than the broader context. Whatever you may think about Officer Brennan's choice of words or actions, the fact remains that Marcus Washington responded with physical violence against a police officer performing his duties. In a civilized society, we cannot allow individuals to take the law into their own hands, no matter how justified they may feel. Defense attorney Carter's closing argument drew together the threads of systemic injustice, reasonable fear, and the right to self-defense. "The prosecution wants you to examine a single punch in isolation," he told the jury. "But context matters. Marcus Washington did not wake up that morning looking for confrontation. He and his wife were living their lives as law-abiding, contributing members of this community when officers targeted them based on race, escalated a non-situation into a crisis, and then reacted with violence when questioned." Carter gestured toward Marcus. "This Marine survived combat zones where split-second decisions meant life or death. On that sidewalk, he made such a decision to protect himself and his wife from immediate harm. The law recognizes that every person, regardless of skin color, has the right to defend themselves against unlawful assault, even when that assault comes from someone wearing a badge." As the jury filed out to begin deliberations, the tension in the courtroom was palpable. Legal analysts predicted a difficult deliberation, with some jurors likely sympathetic to law enforcement regardless of evidence, while others might see the case through the lens of racial justice. Outside, the crowds had grown larger as the trial progressed. Supporters held signs with slogans like "Justice for Marcus" and "End Police Racism," while a smaller but vocal group of police supporters maintained a counter-presence. National media outlets broadcast live from the courthouse steps, with commentators speculating about the broader implications of the case for policing race relations and accountability. The jury's deliberation stretched from hours into days, suggesting significant disagreement among the members. Notes sent to the judge requested clarification on self-defense law and the definition of excessive force, indicating the central questions they were wrestling with. On the fourth day, as tensions rose both inside and outside the courthouse, the jury foreperson finally sent word they had reached a verdict. As Marcus and Tasha sat at the defense table, holding hands tightly, the judge called the court to order. The foreperson, a middle-aged white woman who had remained inscrutable throughout the trial, stood with the verdict form. On the charge of aggravated assault on a police officer, we find the defendant, Marcus Washington. The courtroom held its collective breath. "Not guilty." A murmur ran through the gallery. On the charge of simple assault, we find the defendant guilty. The split verdict reflected the jury's nuanced view of the case. By acquitting Marcus of the serious felony charge while convicting on the lesser misdemeanor, they acknowledged both the improper conduct of the officers and the technical illegality of Marcus's response. As the verdict was announced, Marcus remained stoic, his military training evident in his composed expression. Beside him, Tasha allowed tears of relief to fall. Though not a complete victory, the verdict meant Marcus would not face years in prison. More importantly, the trial had forced a public reckoning with issues of racial profiling and police accountability that would continue long after the case concluded. Outside the courthouse, as Marcus and Tasha emerged to address their supporters, the true impact of their ordeal was just beginning to unfold across Philadelphia and beyond. As dusk fell over Philadelphia, the plaza outside the courthouse transformed into a sea of candlelight. Thousands of people from all walks of life stood in silent vigil, the flames of their candles dancing in the gentle spring breeze. The peaceful demonstration had been organized by a coalition of community groups while the jury deliberated, evolving into something more profound after the split verdict. Marcus and Tasha Washington stood on the courthouse steps, still processing the day's events. Though Marcus had avoided the most serious charges and potential prison time, he still faced sentencing for the simple assault conviction. More importantly, both recognized that their case had become a catalyst for a larger movement. Taking the microphone, Tasha addressed the gathered crowd, her voice carrying across the hushed plaza. Today, the jury acknowledged that what happened to us was wrong, but this was never just about one incident or one couple. Across this city and this country, black citizens face harassment, humiliation, and violence simply for existing in spaces where others think we don't belong. As she spoke, Marcus stood beside her, his presence a silent testimony to resilience. When Tasha finished, community leaders took turns addressing specific cases of police misconduct that had previously received little attention. Mothers whose sons had been stopped and searched without cause. Professionals who had been pulled over repeatedly in their own neighborhoods, students harassed while walking home from school. Each story connected to the Washington's experience, creating a powerful collective narrative of injustice and resistance. The vigil was being broadcast live on local television and streamed online, reaching audiences far beyond Philadelphia. Social media platforms filled with images of the candlelight gathering the hashtag #MoreThanOneCase trending nationally. What none of the participants knew was that across town, an anonymous source was meeting with Ayanna Lewis of the Philadelphia Tribune in a parking garage reminiscent of Watergate. The source, a mid-level administrator in the police department's records division, passed Lewis a flash drive containing internal communications that would change the trajectory of the case and the city. "They've been running a quota system," the source whispered, constantly glancing toward the garage entrance. "Officers assigned to certain neighborhoods are expected to make specific numbers of stops and arrests, with Black and Latino residents as primary targets. Those who meet quotas get preferred assignments and overtime opportunities, those who don't face consequences." Most damning were emails between the police chief and district commanders explicitly discussing how to increase productivity in affluent areas where black professionals had recently moved. One email specifically mentioned Chestnut Hill, the Washington's neighborhood, as needing additional attention due to changing demographics. The documents revealed that Officers Brennan and Wallace had been among the highest performers in this unofficial system, with Brennan receiving commendations for his proactive policing in transitioning neighborhoods. Lewis worked through the night with her editors to verify the documents and prepare a story that would withstand inevitable legal challenges. The Tribune published their explosive report online at 5:00 a.m., with print editions hitting newsstands as morning broke over the city. By noon, the story had been picked up by national outlets. The police chief issued an immediate denial, but within hours, other sources began corroborating details. 3 black officers, inspired by Officer Wallace's testimony, came forward with their own accounts of the department's targeting practices. As public outrage mounted, local businesses began taking sides in ways that had economic consequences. Companies that publicly supported the police union's defense of Officer Brennan faced boycotts from black consumers and allies. Several prominent corporations headquartered in Philadelphia issued statements supporting police reform and accountability. The division extended to city government, where the city council called an emergency session to address the allegations. Councilmember Regina Jackson, representing a predominantly black district, introduced legislation requiring comprehensive data collection on all police stops, mandatory body cameras, with penalties for non-functionality and civilian oversight of disciplinary proceedings. What happened to Marcus and Tasha Washington was not an isolated incident, Jackson declared during the heated session. It was the product of systematic targeting sanctioned at the highest levels of our police department. As the council debated, national civil rights leaders arrived in Philadelphia, recognizing the city had become ground zero for a renewed push for police accountability. They met with the Washingtons, offering support and helping to channel the growing movement's energy towards specific reforms. The widening scandal prompted the Department of Justice to announce a pattern or practice investigation into the Philadelphia Police Department, with federal authorities taking possession of records and interviewing officers at all levels. Most surprisingly, Officer Brennan's carefully constructed image began to crumble as previous victims of his misconduct came forward, emboldened by the Washington case. A black medical student described being thrown against a wall and searched while walking home from the library. A Latino business owner recounted Brennan confiscating cash from his register during a routine inspection. A black family detailed how Brennan had followed their teenage sons home from school, repeatedly making threatening comments. Each story reinforced the pattern revealed in the leaked documents, creating a damning portrait of targeted harassment. At the Washington home, a remarkable scene unfolded. Dozens of military veterans, many still in uniform, formed a protective perimeter around the property after online threats targeted the couple. The veterans, from diverse backgrounds and representing all branches of service, maintained a round-the-clock presence, rotating in shifts. Their silent vigil sent a powerful message. Attacking the Washingtons meant confronting those who had served the nation. Inside, Marcus and Tasha prepared for the sentencing hearing scheduled for the following week. Attorney Carter was optimistic, given the shifting public sentiment and the judge's increasingly sympathetic demeanor, as more evidence of departmental misconduct emerged. Under normal circumstances, simple assault can carry up to 2 years, Carter explained. But given the circumstances and your clean record, we have strong arguments for probation or time served. What worried them more was the ongoing campaign of intimidation. Despite the protective presence outside their home, threatening messages continued arriving. Tasha's former supervisor at the hospital had been pressured to provide negative information about her work performance. Anonymous tips to city inspectors had triggered investigations of supposed code violations at their property. The psychological toll was mounting even as their public support grew. As the sentencing date approached, tensions escalated further. Anonymous threats targeted the courthouse, prompting increased security measures. The jury, though dismissed after delivering their verdict, reported harassment from both supporters and opponents of the Washingtons. Judge Reynolds received so many threatening messages that he was assigned a security detail. In this charged atmosphere, a crucial development occurred in the jury room. The forewoman, who had maintained communication with several jurors after the trial, contacted Attorney Carter with disturbing information. During deliberations, 2 jurors had revealed they were close friends with police officers and had concealed this connection during jury selection. More concerning, they claimed to have received text messages during the trial from police sources, suggesting the department expected a conviction. While this information came too late to affect the verdict, Carter immediately filed it with the court and the Department of Justice, adding evidence of potential jury tampering to the expanding investigation. On the eve of sentencing, as Philadelphia teetered between hope for reform and fear of deeper division, Marcus and Tasha made a decision that would define the next phase of their journey. Whatever the outcome of the hearing, they would not retreat from the spotlight or the responsibility that had been thrust upon them. They would use their experience to push for lasting change, not just in policing, but in how America confronted its ongoing struggle with racial justice. As they prepared for court, neither could have predicted the extraordinary developments that would unfold in the days ahead, transforming personal trauma into a powerful force for collective healing and institutional change. The courtroom was filled beyond capacity for Marcus Washington's sentencing hearing, with overflow crowds watching on monitors in adjacent rooms. Judge Michael Reynolds, who had presided throughout the trial with increasing concern about the broader implications of the case, entered with a solemn expression that revealed nothing of his intentions. Marcus stood as the judge took his seat, his posture military straight, Tasha and Attorney Carter flanking him supportively. "Before we proceed with sentencing," Reynolds began, surprising everyone, "I must address several matters that have come to light since the verdict." He referenced the jury tampering allegations, the leaked police documents, and the Department of Justice investigation, noting that these developments, while not affecting the technical validity of the conviction, created a troubling context that cannot be ignored in the interest of justice. The judge then addressed Marcus directly. "Mr. Washington, you have been found guilty of simple assault. Under normal circumstances, this could result in imprisonment. However, these circumstances are far from normal." Reynolds proceeded to deliver a sentence that acknowledged both the letter and the spirit of justice: time served, plus 1 year of probation and 100 hours of community service, specifically teaching conflict resolution skills to youth in underserved communities. "Your military service clean prior record and the extraordinary circumstances of this case warrant leniency," Reynolds concluded. "This court cannot in good conscience impose further punishment on a man who was himself the victim of misconduct." The ruling represented a near-total victory for Marcus, allowing him to rebuild his life while channeling his experience toward positive community impact. Outside the courthouse, as Marcus and Tasha emerged to address supporters, news broke that dramatically expanded the significance of their case. The Department of Justice announced it was filing civil rights charges against Officer Robert Brennan for violating the Washington's constitutional rights. Simultaneously, the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office, under intense public pressure, revealed it was investigating Brennan for perjury based on his trial testimony, which had been contradicted by video evidence and multiple witnesses. The police chief facing federal investigation and calls for resignation from city council members held a hastily arranged press conference announcing his retirement to spend time with family. His second-in-command and 3 district commanders were placed on administrative leave pending investigation of their roles in the quota system. Within days, the mayor established an independent commission to review departmental policies, hiring practices, and disciplinary procedures, appointing respected civil rights attorneys and community leaders to ensure meaningful reform. Officer Wallace, who had risked his career to testify truthfully, received both death threats and commendations. Though ostracized by many fellow officers, he became a consultant to the Reform Commission, providing insider perspective on how to transform police culture from within. For Marcus and Tasha, vindication came with both relief and responsibility. Offers poured in for book deals, speaking engagements, and media appearances. Rather than capitalizing financially on their ordeal, they established the Washington Justice Foundation, dedicated to supporting victims of police misconduct and advocating for systemic reform. Using funds raised by supporters during their legal battle, they provided legal assistance, counseling services, and community organizing resources to those without the national platform their case had generated. 1 year after the fateful encounter on a Philadelphia sidewalk, the City Council unanimously passed the Washington Act, comprehensive legislation requiring implicit bias training for all officers, civilian oversight of police disciplinary proceedings, transparent data collection on all stops and searches, and severe penalties for officers who disabled body cameras or filed false reports. Similar legislation was introduced in state legislatures across the country, with Marcus and Tasha testifying at hearings about their experience and the need for structural change. Perhaps most remarkably, Marcus accepted an invitation to address new recruits at the Philadelphia Police Academy about racial bias and community relations. Standing before young officers at the beginning of their careers, he shared not anger, but wisdom. The badge you'll wear represents both power and responsibility. How you use that power, especially with those who look different from you, will define not just your career, but the relationship between police and the communities they serve. Tasha resumed her nursing career, but at a different hospital that had actively recruited her during her forced unemployment. Her colleagues described her as having returned with even greater compassion, particularly for patients and families experiencing trauma and injustice beyond their medical conditions. She established a support group for healthcare workers of color facing workplace discrimination, creating safe space for sharing experiences and strategies for resilience. The Washingtons chose to remain in their Chestnut Hill home despite opportunities to relocate. Running away would send the wrong message, Marcus explained in a rare interview. Change happens when people stand their ground and demand better, not just for themselves, but for everyone who comes after them. Their decision proved transformative for the neighborhood, which became a model for community policing reforms. Residents established a civilian advisory board that met regularly with district officers, building relationships based on mutual respect rather than suspicion and fear. Officer Brennan's legal troubles mounted as the perjury investigation expanded to include evidence tampering and civil rights violations throughout his career. Former victims came forward with credible accounts of racial targeting, excessive force, and fabricated charges, painting a picture of an officer who had operated with impunity for years. His eventual conviction on multiple counts sent a powerful message that the blue wall of silence could no longer shield those who abused their authority. On the anniversary of the incident, Marcus and Tasha walked hand in hand down the same sidewalk where their ordeal began. No police cars followed them. No store managers viewed them with suspicion. Instead, they moved freely through the space they had earned through unimaginable sacrifice and courage. Between them walked their newborn daughter, Hope, born 9 months after Marcus's acquittal on the serious charges. Her existence represented their faith in a future worth fighting for, despite the trauma they had endured. As they passed the spot where Marcus had thrown the punch that changed everything, they paused briefly, acknowledging how a single moment of injustice had catalyzed a movement for lasting change. Then they continued forward their personal journey, inseparable from the ongoing struggle for a nation where the color of one's skin would no longer determine how they were treated by those sworn to protect and serve. What do you think about the Washingtons' decision to stay and fight for change rather than move away after everything they experienced? Comment below with your thoughts on what real courage looks like in the face of injustice. If this story moved you, please like, subscribe, and share it with others who need to understand these crucial issues. Your support helps us continue bringing these powerful stories to light. Thank you for joining us on this journey toward justice and equality for all Americans. This story illustrates how a single moment of injustice can spark a movement for systemic change when people refuse to be silenced. Marcus and Tasha Washington's ordeal reveals the deep-rooted racial biases that persist in American institutions, particularly law enforcement. Despite following society's rules for success, education, military service, professional careers, they discovered that achievement provides no immunity from racial profiling and discrimination. Their journey demonstrates the power of solidarity when diverse communities unite against injustice. From teenagers with technological skills to veterans standing guard from whistleblowers inside the system to community organizers on the streets, lasting change requires collective action across racial and social divides. The Washington case also highlights the importance of accountability in power structures. When those entrusted with authority abuse it, the damage extends beyond individual victims to undermine public trust in vital institutions. True reform demands transparency, civilian oversight, and consequences for misconduct. Perhaps most significantly, their story teaches us about moral courage, the willingness to stand firm when retreat would be easier. By choosing to fight not just for themselves, but for all who face similar injustice, the Washingtons transformed personal trauma into powerful advocacy. Their decision to remain in their community rather than flee demonstrates that sometimes the most revolutionary act is simply refusing to be driven away from spaces where you rightfully belong. What would you have done in Marcus and Tasha's position? Would you have accepted the plea deal for an easier path or stood your ground to fight for greater change? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you've ever witnessed or experienced racial profiling, how did it affect your view of our justice system? Your stories matter in this ongoing conversation. This case reminds us that justice requires more than outrage. It demands sustained attention and action from all of us. If this story moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe to support more content that examines these crucial social issues. Share this video with someone who needs to understand the reality of racial injustice in America, especially those who might view these experiences with skepticism. Thank you for joining us in these difficult but necessary conversations. Together, we can build a society where everyone is truly equal under the law, regardless of skin color. Until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and remember that real change begins when ordinary people refuse to accept injustice as normal.